Thanks for joining us today for a budget update from OpenSky Policy Institute. I'm Todd Hendricks, Communications Director, joined by Craig Beck, a policy analyst who's going to update us on where things stand with the budget at this point in the session.
Thanks, Todd. So Wednesday is day 47, and budget bills need to pass before day 50. The legislature is currently working on what are called the mid-biennium adjustment bills, which simply mean that we are adjusting the budget enacted last year. Budget adjustments in the even year of the biennium, where we are now, are optional, but they are not required. There are two budget bills this year, what we call the mainline budget, which is the budget bill which funds agencies and other state operations, and the transfers bill, which authorizes transfers between funds, including the general fund, various cash funds, and the cash reserve. The bills are LBs 1412 and 1413, respectively. Both of these bills moved from the second round of debate on Tuesday, day 46 of the session. The budget bills contain quite a lot this year, and effectively the committee is trying to find $1 billion to reduce property taxes. In trying to find these funds, the budget bills move a lot of money around, including from various cash funds to the general fund. While overall spending increases, there are reductions in several agency budgets, and much of the increase in the second year of the biennium is attributed to required funding for the state's public K-12 education system. One item that's looming over the budget is the income tax cuts, which were passed last year. While they phase in over time, they are impacting the budget in the current biennium because they have such a large effect on the following biennium.
So let's go into a little bit more depth on what changed in the budget proposal from general file to select file.
Sure. So as noted, the budget bills moved from select file, or the second round of debate, on day 46. First round debate was last week, and several items were debated, which led to some changes adopted by the body on the second round. Some of the items which changed from general to select file include a reworking of a transfer from the State Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, which originally transferred $70 million to the general fund. On select file, the body amended the bill to only transfer $30 million to the general fund, with $40 million going to the Department of Labor for workforce development. The reduced transfer will decrease general funds appropriated for the Department of Labor with no fiscal impact relative to the committee's budget proposal. Also, language was added to prioritize funding for drinking water improvements for Native American tribes under a no-drink order from the Environmental Protection Agency. This language comes after negotiations between general and select file, though it is a prioritization of existing funds and not new funds. $600,000 was earmarked for court interpreter services. This language was included in the budget last year, but the funding was vetoed by the governor. And the language adopted during select file of this year's debate clarifies that the funding comes from within the court's existing budget. Additionally, a couple of amendments passed during floor debate, including a reallocation of $25 million of housing funds, which will now split the funds equally between rural workforce housing and middle-income workforce housing programs, and an amendment which clarifies that within the Developmental Disability Aid Program, unutilized or unspent funds appropriated to the program will be distributed at the end of a fiscal year to service providers. During floor debate, legislators discussed this amendment as helping to relieve the backlog of services for developmentally disabled Nebraskans.
So as the budget bill moves to the final round of consideration and passage, presumably, what does all of this mean now and going forward in terms of where the state stands?
Sure. So there are a lot of moving pieces in the budget, but overall, there are some themes which are readily apparent. So first, while this budget increases spending over the biennium, a large chunk of it is statutorily required spending on our public K-12 education funding formula. Spending growth is just 1.5% in the second year of the biennium, even including the large sum required for public schools. Low spending growth at a time when inflation is still running hot is unlikely to sustain existing services. While spending growth for the coming biennium is not yet set, we have an idea of what the body is thinking, and for now, spending growth is set at about 1.9%. Again, this is unlikely to keep up with rising costs. The second aspect is that the income tax cuts passed by the body last year are having an increasingly large impact. Looking at the committee's budget proposal sent to the floor, the ending balance for the current biennium is $575 million. Leaving that amount of money in the general fund between bienniums is pretty unprecedented. When we look at the following or the upcoming biennium, even after factoring in the low projected spending growth, that $575 million drops to just under $70 million. As noted by the committee, this means that there's just $70 million to allocate to priorities beyond the budget bills. The reason that these funds go away in the following biennium is because they are needed to pay for the income tax cuts. And third and finally, all of these moving pieces, keeping an unprecedented amount of money in the general fund between biennia, low spending growth, and very little money for spending outside of the budget, indicate that the state's finances are in limbo. Everything we are relying on right now for future years is based on projections. Revenues are projected, spending is projected. And so if those projections don't come in as expected, then the body will need to make future adjustments. The one thing that's certain as of now is the tax cuts, which will reduce revenue. And as Nebraska must balance its budget on a biennial basis, should revenues come in lower than projected over the following years, spending will need to be cut if new revenue is not raised.
Well, thank you for that breakdown, and thank you for joining us for our budget update today. Stay with OpenSky for more updates throughout the legislative session.